So Rob in Virginia, pronouns are he, him, is on to talk to explain to Shannon and me that there's merit to being irrational. So welcome, Tom. Rob, sorry.
Okay.
Hi, how are you doing?
Doing all right. How are you?
Thank you.
I'm doing pretty good. Of course, this is all I've been a long time listener, so this is all kind of dependent on how I use the word rationality. And for me, it's always been easiest to use rationality as being equivalent to logical. And given that we're human beings and given that we're human beings and we are ultimately all our emotions are irrational. That's
no, they're not.
Gives our life purpose.
No, I counter that. Emotions aren't necessarily irrational. They're actually very well grounded in outcomes. So, for example, if you have an emotion like happiness, that's something that other people can recognize, and it's something that motivates you towards becoming more social. It's something that tells you that the object in the environment or the environment itself that you're interacting with is beneficial. That's not an irrational state. A lot of emotions can become irrational or can lead to irrational thought, but emotions themselves at base aren't irrational. They're cause and effect.
Well, sure, I understand that as it applies to generally amongst human beings, but I'm kind of like talking about an absolute kind of.
What do you mean by talking about okay, well, you started by saying that emotions aren't rational. So can we at least agree that you can't just say that as a blanket statement? Like that's actually quite dangerous. I think that's why I want to make sure that I squash that. Saying that emotions themselves aren't rational isn't.
Let me hop in for half a second, because I think so. There's a context in which I would say emotions aren't rational. And then there's another context where I would say emotions are rational. And it depends on whether we're talking about how I arrived at this emotion and whether I'm making a decision based on it. That may be a distinction. I don't know that that's helpful, but that's the two scenarios that came up in my head to try to sort this out. But we could set aside irrational, whatever. Because I don't think either Shannon or myself are saying that I don't think it's surprising to either of us that what some people would call irrational can still have benefits and merits to it.
Potentially.
That's exactly right, Matt. Like I said, that's why I prefaced this with saying that it's easiest for me to equate rational with logical. If you're just going by complete logical, it depends on what you're basing emotions on as to whether or not they actually have value. Obviously, you can say, if I am emotionally rewarded by doing a certain thing, then this certain thing has value to me. But I'm talking about more like an absolute, extremely perfectly logical thing. And I would just like to hear your opinions on the fact that human beings are not entirely logical. And all the things that give our life value are basically based on the irrational. And that,
I'm going to let Shannon go ahead, except that that's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard, because I get value from things that are irrational, and I get value from things that are perfectly rational. I get value from knowledge. It's not like there's no value in knowing what the causes of cancer and potential cures are, and there's nothing irrational about that.
I'm back to emotion again, though. So I really want to hammer this home, because it seems as though all of what you're saying is founded on the belief that emotions themselves are at base irrational. So anything that comes from them, good, bad, or otherwise, we'll say good, because that seems to be the foundation of your argument. So emotions are irrational, and good things come from emotions. Thus, good things come from being irrational. Seems to be what you're saying, right? No. Okay. So what is it that you're saying then? Because that is what it sounds like you're saying, is that emotions are irrational, and sometimes good things come from that. So good things come from being irrational. Therefore, what? Like being irrational is a good thing? Like, why do you keep drawing back to emotions?
If we say that emotions are rational, we have to base those on a certain rationale. And those rationales are not absolute. They're not objectively provable things.
But they can be objectively provable things, though. Okay, so I'm not saying that every emotion that you have is going to lead you to a rational behavior, that you're going to interpret it rationally. But emotions aren't things that we think of. These are things, emotions are things that happen to us, right? They're like reflexes. They are things that happen to us. That's what emotions are. So emotions are like the base of cognition. They are at the foundation. And they are like reflexes. So you can write out almost like an if-then statement. Like, if something good happens to me, I'll likely be happy. Like, if then, right? If something that benefits me happens, I'll likely be happy. If something that's a detriment to me happens, I'll likely be sad. Like, those are definitionally rational propositions that I just laid out. And that's kind of the way, like simplistically, that's kind of the way emotions work. It's more complex than that, but simplistically, that is the case. So how we as cognitive entities deal with those emotions and interpret them in regard to our surroundings and our environment and determine how to either assuage them or facilitate them may be irrational. We may make choices that are irrational as a result of emotions, but emotions themselves are things that happen to us that are based on cause and effect. So perhaps that's the differentiation. Maybe you're saying people have emotions and then make good or bad choices, or seek out good emotions and they make good or bad choices to seek out those emotions. But I think that's a different type of argument. Does that differentiation make sense? Because I think it's important.
Well, it makes sense if you actually, describe cognition as the way you put it forth. What I'm saying is that cognition, the basis of cognition is actually memory, not to get off topic, but if you remember.
No, it's not. No, because you have cognition before you have long-term what? Okay, so the basis of cognition isn't memory. It's not. Otherwise, people who had anterograde amnesia, for example, couldn't have cognition, or retrograde. I'm sorry, people who had retrograde amnesia, or people who had Alzheimer's or any sort of like demyelination event, like they would lose aspects of their cognition, but they're still able to be cognitive entities. So you can't tie cognition to memory. Memory is a component of cognition. Cognition is significantly more complex than that. So cognition is just being able to have perceptions and then generate thoughts about those perceptions. That's what cognition is. So you don't necessarily need to be able to form a memory at all to be able to have a cognition. You just need to be able to have a perception.
Well, in order to generate thoughts about a perception, you need to have memory of that perception.
No, you don't. In order to be able to couch that thought in a previously established perception so that you can make a really good determination or prediction about what that perception means, you utilize your memory in order to like place that perception into a context. If I wiped your memory right now so that you didn't have any, like if I put you under anesthesia right now and wiped your memory out so that you didn't have any memory of what it was like to see, to hear, to taste, to smell, where your body was in space, if I wiped all of that out, but left your perceptual faculties there, like this is a philosophical question. I don't even think that that's biologically possible. But if I did that, you could still, after you came out of anesthesia, open your eyes and have a visual experience. And that is what cognition is. You could still open your eyes and have an auditory experience, an olfactory experience. All of those are forms of cognition. You could have cognition without memory. Memory enriches cognition. Memory makes cognition valuable. Memory is what makes cognition something that we can utilize so that we can like exist in our space. Like, I don't want to downplay what memory is in regards to cognition, but memory is not cognition, and cognition is not dependent upon memory.
Well, I would say that, the way that it's really off topic going into cognition about this. I was really trying to talk about rationality, and which is why I specified that I consider rationality to be equivalent to logicality, just because of the ease of use.
I think you're oversimplifying, and I think that a good chunk of this is just general confusion about what language to use. Are we all in agreement that emotions are beneficial, that facts are beneficial, that we can appreciate and have merit from both things we feel and things we know?
Yes, absolutely.
Then let's just move on.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Get on that page.
What I want to hear was your opinions, basically, on the fact that human beings are not entirely logical. We are somewhat irrational, and those irrational things that give us benefit.
Hey, water is wet, and the sky is often blue. How many obvious things are we going to state? Of course, human beings.
I'm not talking about denying reality. I'm talking about giving value to reality.
I already value reality. I promise, Rob, I'm not trying to be a dick. But when you say people are irrational, who the fuck doesn't know that? That's like saying water's wet. But I already value reality.
That's the thing. Often people are presented in this show and in some other places as logic is this perfect, awesome thing. But the irrational part of reality is where we give value to things that not necessarily everyone gives value to. They do not have objective, absolute value. And that's what makes life worth living. It's a very subjective thing to say that, I value something and that this thing has objective value. And I just wanted to hear your opinions on, where you draw the line.
I don't draw a line. I value what I fucking value, and I don't value the things I don't value. I don't draw a line there. There are facts that I value. There are facts that benefit my life. There are emotions and opinions and things that benefit my life. I'm sorry that, I learned this back even before in the Star Trek movie where Spock told everybody that logic was just the beginning of wisdom. That was not that profound for me, but it was profound for some people. I don't know why we're talking about this. This is the way the world works. People are going to value what they value.
Yeah, and I could subjectively value something. Like when you look at people as a group. So like we could have a group of 1 billion people, and I'm one of those people. And I subjectively like chocolate ice cream. Like I subjectively like it. But objectively, I like it. Like for me, that's my preference, objectively. Like if you're talking about an individual perspective, like it seems as though you're using them interchangeably, subjective and objective, because objectively that's my favorite. But if you look at us as a group, my preference is subjective, but objectively that is my preference.
I agree. What I'm really concerned, what I really want to hear is your opinions on what draws the line between, what is subjectively good versus what is objectively or ultimately good. I mean, you can point out facts about,
define the word good. Define the word good then. And once you define the word good, we can objectively point to things that lead to good.
Yep.
But you'd have to define the word good. Like that's a problem. Like
but your definition of good is going to be subjective. This is the foundation of morals, which we're going to get to with the next call as well.
Oh, yay! I love them. Sorry, I got really excited. I love them.
To say what is objectively good, nothing. I see no reason to say that nothing is intrinsically, inherently, objectively good. Only thing I can do is once there is a definition of here's what we're going to define as good, you can make objective assessments as to which things are consistent with that definition. Until that definition exists, as Shannon was pointing out, I look at things as if I have my own definition of what is good. But if somebody disagrees with me, then we have to have a discussion about what that means.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
I completely agree, and I understand you want to get on to the next call. I was just saying that, these things that even if we define something, that's simply a matter of subjectivity. It's not a subjective thing.
The definition may be subjective. The definition may be arbitrary, but it doesn't necessarily need to be for everything. But as soon as there is a definition, assessments can be made non-subjectively. It's just, I use chess as the example, which is how we're going to get into probably the next call, which is the rules of chess were arbitrary. Somebody just made them up. They didn't have to be what they are. As a matter of fact, they've changed. Similarly, the goals within chess were arbitrary, how you win the game or how you avoid losing the game. There's nothing in the universe that dictated this is what chess needs to be. But once the rules are there, the assessment of positions and moves is no longer a matter of subjective opinion. There are factually objective, better and worse moves.
Agreed. However, those rules were subjectively determined. And
I said that.
So,
I said that.
Can I try something really quick?
Yeah, because I give up.
Okay, and this will be the last thing. So I'm going to try something really quick, just from a dialectic perspective. So you're saying what is or isn't good, and I asked you for the definition of good. So I believe that your and my definition of good will probably align with some sort of a relative consistency, just because that's the way that we use words in the English language. In order for us to derive any meaning from them that allows us to be able to communicate, that word has to have a definition that we both understand. So when these conversations happen, what I'm hearing is that, what if this word that we both agree on, like morals or good or whatever, what if this word had a whole ass different definition? If it had a whole different definition, then what? Because the definitions of words are subjective, right? We agreed that good means this. The word good is only means this because we agreed upon it, and that's subjective. So what if I said good and I meant stab you in the face? But that to me is like nonsense. That's an obfuscation. That's a way of looking away from what we're trying to talk about, which is what is or isn't good, what the definition of good means, what we can do to be good. Like, we all understand kind of what that means. Like, the better conversation would be, what does it mean to be good? Can we have a refined conversation about what it means to be good or what it means to be moral? But instead, people are more interested in having a conversation about whether or not the definition of good was subjectively come to, which of course it was, because that's the way that language works.
That's the way all definitions are.
So that's what's frustrating to me, because they're all obfuscations. They're just saying, well, what if good meant stab you in the face? Sorry. I get frustrated.
We have got to move on, Rob. I've got announcements to make and everything else, and I appreciate the call, but we got to get out of here.
I can make one point.
Nope.
That was really long.
Yeah. And that was the second or third time that there was like, let me make one additional point. Nope. Got to move on.